You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. My name is Alan Weitz. Before we begin, I've got to say we really enjoy doing these podcasts, and we surely hope you do too. Getting feedback from listeners is something we encourage, if only to figure out how to make the show even better. If you like what we're doing, or if there's something you'd like us to improve upon, please take a few moments, send us your thoughts on iTunes, Twitter, or if you really want to make a really good impression, a singing telegram. Your input makes you part of the show. Today's show is about creative tips for the new year. And by the way, depending on your belief system or where your family comes from, you can find New Year's celebrations in January, February, March, April, June, and about a half a dozen times from September through November. So when we say New Year tips, it's open for interpretation, okay? Joining us in this discussion is writer and photographer Todd Vorenkamp and Jason Fulford, who is a photographer and Guggenheim Fellow and the co-founder of J&L Books. Jason's monographs include Crushed, Raising Frogs for Dollars, and The Mushroom Collector. He's also the co-editor of The Photographer's Playbook, published by Aperture, which features ideas, stories, and anecdotes from many of the world's most talented photographers. Also joining us today is our producer, John Harris, who, as many of you know, is also a writer and a veteran photographer, a fine one at that. Jason, I think what's interesting about the book is that anybody who's going to read this, first of all, it's a great little thing because it's very short little chapters. You could pick it up and put it down. It's great. You could leave this book anywhere and make good use of it. But there's such a variety of thoughts. Some of them are totally unrelated to photography. Mm-hmm. A couple of them are like almost little short stories and essays that are kind of funny. But you can not necessarily pick and choose, but some stuff will really ring bells with you and some will just leave you cold. But there's so much in there that you have to be affected by it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's millions of photographers out there, and we all have our own particular sensibility, our own motivations, reasons for making pictures, whether they be personal or professional or commercial or artistic. And we tried to reflect that in the selection of contributions in the book. We have, from a war photographer to an artist to a park ranger,
Park Ranger is a story I particularly like.
That's right. That's
we
the
were talking
longest
about that
piece in the
yesterday.
book.
That's a great piece.
It's a guy called Abel Brown. He's a photographer and a park ranger. He was a park ranger in Brooklyn for several years out on the beach, and now he lives in California where he's still a park ranger.
And there's no clear lesson in it, but it's a great story. And he's walking on the beach doing his rounds as a park ranger, and he sees this guy who looks like a salty sailor, and he asks to photograph the guy, and the guy's like I'll say a typical New Yorker, but like the stereotypical New Yorker he's a jerk in response, and he doesn't want to get his picture taken. And then
I think at some point Abel sees a bird with a necktie.
Yeah, so it was either him or his partner.
This guy tells him about it.
Yeah. It's like I think his partner sees there's a turkey walking on the beach with a bow tie, and I guess it'd been out there forever and it was exhausted. So his partner picks up the turkey and to carry it to their van or their truck. And Abel decides to take a photo of it, and his partner looks at him. He says, "Dude, why can't you just let a moment be a moment and not have to photograph it?" It's a great story.
Well, I see a great, buddy movie, cross-country buddy movie in this. Okay, 2 park rangers and a turkey with a bow tie. We're creative here. Let's work
Jason,
on this.
How did you find this photographer? How did you find him?
He was dressed up as a turkey with a bow tie one day.
I also published books through a nonprofit imprint I started called J&L Books. And Abel used to send me submissions in the mail of his drawings. I have a lot of envelopes of his drawings. And then we became friends over the years.
Todd, you recently did for B&H 13 tips for kickstarting your creativity. And from what I understand, this is based on your research during your MFA for fine art photography. Is that correct?
Some of it was based on my MFA experience, and some of it came from Jason's book. Some of it also came from a gentleman named Douglas Beasley, who's actually featured in the book, who does a thing called Vision Quest assignment cards. But there's a lot of different ways to encourage creativity. It actually, going back before my MFA days, the true beginning of this search for creative photography started when I was in the Navy. I was a helicopter pilot stationed on USS Rainier on a 7-month cruise. And for 7 months, my world was 750 feet long. And there was only the first several months I was out with my camera all the time taking pictures of helicopters, of other ships, the water, helicopters, other ships, the water. And
is it safe to assume you weren't biking on the carrier?
I was not
early
biking.
In the mornings,
I tried
between shifts.
No,
okay.
I would try to jog every once in a while, but that's problematic. But it's you really, and Navy ships are very colorful with this beautiful shade of gray. So
where were you photographically at this point in time? Because I know you've been shooting for a while, but is this around the same time you started taking pictures, or had you already been? Because again, if you have this limitations of this 750-foot platform for 7 months, that's right there is a good creative starting point.
It is. I shot film for about 10 years, and this was when I was on the Rainier. It was about a year or two into my digital photography world.
Okay, so you already knew what you were looking at. Okay, good.
Kind of, but what happened was I was taking pictures, I was writing a journal, I was sending pictures to my friends and family, and I felt like my photography was getting stale because it was the same subject matter over and over and over. And I don't know if my father sensed this or not. My father's a very good photographer. He sent me a book. It was an old Kodak workshop series book from the 1980s called The Art of Seeing. And I sat down on the ship and I read this book, and it was like my entire world opened up completely. And I started wandering around the ship. Instead of taking pictures of ships and helicopters and water, it was abstracts of bulkheads and light bulbs and switches and rope or line.
The details.
Yeah. So I started seeing the world differently. Years later, I'm in an MFA program, and it was one of the first classes I took with a teacher named Chris Pinchbeck. And one of the assignments very early in the class was, he called it rock and roll photography, which I reproduced in the article as 24. But he basically said, go somewhere, stand in one spot, and make 24 pictures without moving your feet. And at first you think that's not a challenging exercise. Because you're surrounded by stuff. And especially I thought I was a creative photographer, and this book had enlightened me, and I was seeing the world in a new way. So I went to Arcata Square, stood in one spot, started taking pictures, and I got to 12, and it was like I ran into a brick wall. I was like, oh my God, there's no other photos to take.
Where's Arcata?
Northern California.
Ah, okay.
So, then you have to start really pushing yourself to get the next 12 pictures, and you have to start getting creative with what you're doing.
First thing that comes to my mind, get away from your eye level.
Right, exactly.
Lay down on the floor, do something else like that.
A friend of mine gives a similar exercise where you take a hula hoop and you throw it somewhere in a field, and you have to stand in that hula hoop for the day.
A day?
That's right.
Hopefully, the hula hoop includes a restaurant or your brown bag lunch.
And a few other facilities. Yes, I know. Well, that's actually pretty interesting because, again, if you're in an open field during the course of a day, the light alone is going to change so much. So you really do have plenty of opportunities. You just have to have that kind of time on your hands. You've both played around with different exercises and things of that sort. Some of them are more successful than others. Which ones were kind of like not good to you? Which ones did you try out and figured either this did nothing for me or this was just a total failure? Anything come to mind?
I mean, I put it in the article, but I'm not a big fan of it. It's like trying a different type of photography. I think there's something like, so if you're a sports photographer, then try fine art for a day, or, like if you're a wedding photographer, try to do something else. But I think there's a benefit to that, but in a sense, that's not my favorite exercise. I just like going out and making photos.
I kind of like that for one reason. Because first of all, it most likely will lead to more failures because you're not comfortable. You have to break down some walls. One of my teachers back in the day was Milton Glaser, a graphic designer, very well. He's like as good as it gets. And I took several classes with him. And what was wonderful about him is that his classes were open to people from all different media. And if you did the same media, in my case, photography, 2 or 3 times in a row, you were forbidden from touching that media for the rest of the year. And he would tell you what you can do. He'd tell you to pick up a piece of charcoal or a pencil or oil paint or clay. and he got you out of your comfort zone. So this, I feel strongly about that.
That's taking it, like, instead of switching genres of photography, switching art genres. Like, try drawing once. You know, put your camera on the shelf if you don't want to go outside, and make a drawing and see if that helps your photography down the road. I think there's something to be said for that.
One of the tips I read, I don't know if it was from your piece or from in the book, which is a wonderful book, by the way, is put your camera down in a safe place, okay, and then go and look around without a camera, okay? I don't know about putting down my camera anywhere. I'll put it in a bag. But I think that's a good idea to walk around and look. I think one of the saddest things you have today is that if you walk around, people are not experiencing life. They're holding their phone in front of their face all the time. No, put it down. Take a look around.
There's a great piece by James Benning, the filmmaker, in the book. And he says, go for a walk without your camera. Look around. When you find something you want to look at, sit down and watch it for as long as you feel like. Then close your eyes and just listen to it until you're tired of listening to it, then walk home and see what time it is.
What about the camera?
There's no camera involved.
There's no
in that
camera
one.
involved.
Just your eyes. Yeah.
Do you know what the problem with that is? Is that how many times have you walked down the street and you've seen some light striking something and a shadow, and you look around, you look at your watch, and you say, okay, I'm coming back tomorrow to do this.
Right.
Now, raise your
and
hand.
It's cloudy.
Exactly, okay? And the sun has a way of moving every day. Have you noticed that? So I don't know. I kind of like the idea of that, but in practice, if you happen to be seeing something, I'd rather be taking pictures of it than closing my eyes and thinking about it. I don't know. But it is an interesting concept. It is interesting.
There's something to be said for grabbing the shot when you see it. But you should encourage people, once you get that safe shot, once you get what you think you wanted, pause and wait to see if something else develops, because 5 minutes from now, it might be way better.
There's another great piece in the book by Jeff Ladd, who lives in Germany now. He's a writer and a photographer. And he's talking about the difference between digital and film. And he suggests that, he says when you're shooting with film, often you notice something in the world, you go to take a picture of it, and you're not sure if you got it. So you keep shooting, you shoot around it. And maybe your fourth or fifth picture is the best one. But when you're shooting with digital, you see something, you want to take a picture of it, you go, you make it, you look at the screen, you say, I got it, and then you stop and move on to go into something else. And maybe you never get to that fourth or fifth picture.
Unless you started in film.
That's right, or unless, as he suggests, you tape over the screen.
Good idea. I go back and forth just for myself between film and digital, and the discipline of shooting film makes me better at doing digital. And then when I start getting a little too comfortable, I go and pick up one of my film cameras and spend a day or two at that. But
I have this weird thing where, sorry to interrupt, but like when I shoot several photos of the same thing, 3/4 of the time, the first shot is the best for me.
Because that was your gut feeling. Seriously, that was your gut feeling.
I mean, sometimes I think the more I think of the shot and the more I keep shooting it, it's like a diminishing return on that. So.
Now, the flip side of that is that just this morning, I was a half hour earlier than usual because I wanted to prepare for this podcast. And, of course, the light is stunning this morning. The skies are clear and the low-angle sun bouncing off all that mirrored construction in the area. And I kept stopping to photograph light reflecting off of glass and stone walls. And all of a sudden I started getting hung up in the fact that there are people walking by and there's shadows and strong silhouettes. And the first shot was good, but I was waiting for people to hit certain positions, and I just flipped through and just reviewed them before. And I got some good stuff. Why? Because I killed a half hour this morning and wasted all the time I should have been here taking pictures, but I think I got some fun stuff there. Todd, could you give us a few examples of some of the exercises that you mentioned in your article and which ones that you particularly feel strong about?
Sure. A lot of these include restrictions. And by restricting yourself, you're expanding your creativity in a sense, which is counter to what you think. But
no, it's not.
No. That's why that's why it's in the article.
No, as Mr. Beagle Eyes and my teacher, another teacher of mine once said, once you know what your limitations are, everything else is possible. You need parameters. So true exception. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's a good. No. So like I've create restrictions like use one lens, go to one location, shoot only black and white, overexpose, underexpose, photograph everything above you, everything below you, things like that. And it's actually fun to think of the restrictions. That's actually another creative exercise, is to come up with restrictions and then apply them to the photography.
See, the restrictions also eliminate all the other variables. If you only have that lens And I do this myself.
Yeah.
I'm a wide angle nut. Every once in a while, I'll put a 90 or a 200 on and spend a couple of days. Why? It just shakes you loose.
Sure.
All right. And eliminates
You have to
all
see the
other
world
stuff.
in a different way.
Exactly. It edits your vision. It's fine. It's good.
And I think the prime lens is the prime lens, even though people think, oh, you can't zoom in and out, it's going to limit your possibilities. But in a sense, it opens up your world because you see in the parameters of that lens, and you see that lens's field of view, and that you look for photos in that field of view.
And it forces you to physically explore,
Sure.
move closer, move further away, get involved more.
Yep. I think the prime lens is a huge benefit to a lot of people's photography, and it's overlooked because cameras don't generally get sold with prime lenses.
The
these
one
days.
exception is if all you've used is a 50 millimeter lens. In that case, get a wide angle or a tele. What other tips?
One thing I really like is the portable subject, which kind of comes from the garden gnome thing, which I've seen in a couple of movies where someone travels with a garden gnome and they put it in every shot they take of their, the scenic vista with a gnome somewhere. So bring your favorite object. I have a little Lego minifigure that has my initials on his shirt, and I've dropped him into photos before. And it's it forces you have to find a place to put the object, and then you have to compose to shoot whatever you're shooting and then include the object. So it really makes you think about each photo.
Some years ago, some photographers dragged a red velvet couch around the world. I mean, they were up in Arctic Circle with it. They were in Rome. They were all over. I mean, they took it on safaris. Now, I was thinking about just the logistics must have been nuts. But
Right.
that's a fun part of it.
I won't encourage a couch, but
Either would I.
if it fits in your pocket, that might...
It's not carry on.
Right. No, definitely not.
Jacques Lacan says, sure, the picture is in my eye, but me, I'm also in the picture.
Right.
Ooh. So you could have the object in your pocket.
In the portable subject, I have the unselfie selfie where the object is actually you. So you put the tripod on a table or on a support, and you appear in every photo. I'm not good enough looking to do that because people won't like the photos no matter what's in the background. But and then another one that I liked was the mixing bowl. And actually, I'll credit my sailing school buddies. We play a game called Mixing Bowl where you write a bunch of names and you drop them in a bowl and you just pick one out. And one might say blue and go out for an hour and shoot blue or circle or action or happy. And the other thing you can do is do this with your friends. Grab a handful of people that love photography, get together, put these names in a bowl, pick one out, and then go out for a walk and see what you come up with.
Sounds good. Jason, what brought it about? What got you to do this?
It started a few years ago. I was in Rochester giving a talk at RIT with my friend Greg Halpern. He's a professor there. And after the talk, we were talking to someone in the audience, was the editor of Exposure, the magazine that SPE puts out. Mm-hmm. And she asked if we would contribute to the magazine. And I had brought a record player as part of my talk, and so we were talking about records, and we got on the subject of flexi discs. Remember those?
Oh, sure, yeah.
So he said, what if we made a flexi disc? You could put it in the magazine. And the editor was really into the idea. So then we had to think about, okay, what are we going to record? What kind of sound that will have something to do with pictures or picture making? So the first idea we had was that Greg and I would go out and shoot, and we would record the sounds while we were shooting. And then we would put those sounds on the record, and then we would publish the contact sheets of what we shot so you could hear what was happening behind the scenes. And we tried this out, and the pictures were pretty interesting, but the sounds were basically silence, wind, breathing, and a click. And
Like this podcast.
The producer chimes in.
So we switched ideas, and we were thinking how the magazine was distributed to photo teachers around the country. So we thought, what if we make some sound recording that the teachers can use in their classroom as an assignment? So we went out and made field recordings of things that were interesting to listen to. And we came up with 8 or 9 tracks, I think. And then the assignment is the teacher plays this record for their class, and each student picks one of the tracks and takes those sounds as the inspiration for a new picture or a series of pictures. So that was the very beginning of the project. And then Greg and I started talking to each other about, what assignments did you do in school? What assignments do you give to students? And we started wondering about other photographers and their experiences with assignments. And so we started talking to our friends who are teachers or who had been to art school about this topic. And so that's where the book started. And then I ran into Chris Boot from Aperture out in LA at the LA Art Book Fair that year. I mentioned this idea that Greg and I were starting to collect these things from people. And a couple of weeks later, he called me and asked if I would want to collaborate with Aperture on this. So Greg and I said, sure, let's do it. And so the whole project got sort of sped up at that point. And then we spent the next year putting out a big call to lots of people around the world.
Here's a question for you. If you go on the internet, there's zillions of little tips and articles and blogs and this and that about how to kickstart creativity. What about other forms of inspiration?
I think most of my inspiration comes from reading, from literature, and the conversations that I have. And it's kind of like what Todd was talking about earlier, where you have this bowl of words that you have to choose from when you go out and shoot. I guess whatever you're thinking about or whatever you're talking to your friends about becomes, it's just in the background of your head. And then when you go out into the world, you use your intuition, and those things that you're thinking about guide your eye toward what you're going to see.
Photography is an art, and there's people that argue that, and there's people that are actually listening to this podcast going like, that's not true, but it is.
It's an art and a craft. So let's keep everything covered. It's two things.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
And I think when people get cameras, at first they take pictures of things, friends, places, objects. And if your whole photo career is just there's no problem. If you enjoy it, that's cool. But if you look at creative photography and you want to do it, there's nothing to stop you from doing it. And it's because it's an art, creativity is required. And then you can expand your photographic horizons and take pictures of things that only matter to you, but you like to look at. And that's one of the magical things about art, is the creative process.
And I think it's not just if you're an amateur. I think if you're a professional, same thing. You could take that same approach to it. Yeah, you have an outline and you have sketches and you have a format that you have to fit, and you have to make room for text and whatever else is going on in there and sell the product. But it doesn't mean you have to stay in that same box. You could try different approaches and still fill all those requirements, parameters, limitations. Other thoughts on creativity?
I think you can learn a lot from other photographers or other artists just in terms of how they see the world. For me, the importance of art is not about the thing, the fetish of the object or the print. It's more about learning how another person sees the world. That's what you take away from it, and that's something that you can use. These different perspectives you could think of very practically as tools in your tool belt that you could use. You never know if when you'll use them, but at some point in the future.
I call it my arsenal. Mm-hmm. We just made the point earlier that I made references to that. I get my creative impulses visually, and you said you get it from what you're reading about and words.
That's right.
So everybody interprets information and synthesizes all of this data differently. We're not wired the same. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also an important consideration. If say you do pick up a camera and you want to get better at it, and you might pick up an article or see something online and it gives you, a dozen surefire tips of how to get your creativity, but none of them talk to you. It's not that you're not creative. It's just that particular article didn't spark you. And you have to find something that does make you tick.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot to say about the different types of things that are in the book, because they really range from like theoretical ideas to meta ideas to stories to memoirs about photographers who are no longer here, to some practical ideas for students, some resource material for teachers, general advice from life experience from different photographers who've may or may not be professional. There's even some sort of Zen riddles in the book. There's some things that are more spiritual to think about. And I think all of these are all different ways, all different things you can apply to your photography. I think a lot of people often think about books like this as being useful for giving them purely technical advice. How do I make a good picture? But that's a really complicated question, and I think you get at it from all of these other points of view.
Jason, when you were putting together the book, how many things did you discard? How much input did you get and then decide not to use it? And also, how did you guys decide how to balance between these ideas that are maybe more spiritual and thoughtful and others that are kind of hard, practical tips?
Mm-hmm. The book really evolved. It started off, Greg and I thought, maybe 50 contributions max. And Aperture, interestingly enough, our editor, Denise Wolf at Aperture, is ex-Navy. So maybe you guys crossed paths at some point.
It's a
But
small
she's
Navy.
great. And she wanted a lot more, and we were hesitant at first. Also because we only wanted to use photographers whose work we loved. And as the project expanded, we started bringing in some photographers who maybe were a little bit out of our taste range, but provided some interesting material for the overall project. And first, it was just a general collection, looking at everything that came in. And then if we would have some repetition, we would either ask the person for something different or just cut it. And at a certain point, we took stock of everything that had come in, and we thought, oh, we're light on landscape. Oh, we're light on journalism. And so we started reaching out specifically to some people to give us those types of assignments. You were, Alan, you were saying, when did we decide to stop? So we had a deadline. And of course, immediately, as soon as we go to press, we think of 5 or 6 more photographers we should contact. And now we're talking about maybe a volume 2 at some point.
Good stuff.
Did anybody ever push back and say, I don't do creative exercises, I have nothing to give you?
Yeah, there were a couple
And
of
who
people.
are they?
Well, they didn't use those. They didn't specifically use those words, but a couple of photographers that I reached out to declined, either for whatever reason, saying, I'm just being a photographer at this point, or I don't teach, or
Did anybody say I don't know?
I don't know.
Meaning creativity tips. Say, were there any photographers who you approached and said, could you give us some ideas, tips on creativity? And they basically would admit that they really don't know where it comes from. It just is.
Nobody
Did anybody
said that,
say that?
Nobody said that to me, but I'm sure some people thought that. And I mean, I can say I was like that until I started being asked to talk about my work, because a lot of us photographers, we come at these things because we are more visual.
Especially a creative type, you know, I didn't know that was special.
That's right.
Doesn't everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so some people aren't even aware of the fact that they are actually tuned visually to be able to take pictures.
And it's hard to articulate sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the things about photography is it's a visual art, but there's also a technical side, and you got to find the balance.
Or in a few cases, I know people who are technically dead on, but their idea of taking a good picture is traveling 8,000 miles to climb and stand on the same pile of rocks that 8,000 other people to take the same picture.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's gorgeous, but I've seen it 50 times
Right.
already and elsewhere.
I visited a lot of grad schools around the world, and I think a lot of the motivation for grad school is learning how to talk about your work.
Yeah.
You see a lot of students who are maybe they're even making similar work to the work they were making when they came into school, but they all of a sudden, they just now can have a longer conversation about it.
That might be that's an interesting point right there. Is that I also taught for some years, and I had to learn to articulate a lot of things that to me were just inborn. I don't know. They're just there.
At my first class in art school, I produced a photo on like the first week, and the teacher says, "Great photo. What does it mean?" And it was like,
That's a good sign.
Yeah, you're like, I have no idea what it means. I just like the picture. So that was grad school for me. Was 4 years of learning how to articulate why I took one picture but not another, or why I wanted to do a series of photos, or why I wanted to do this project. And that was a challenge for me, because until that point, I just took pictures of stuff I like looking at.
I guess let me just be devil's advocate for a second to say some of these tips are maybe more for students. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're for everybody. Do you guys still use these tips? I mean, I personally feel that, if you're a working photographer, you're going to find ways to improve your creativity day in, day out. I mean, as you said, Alan, you're going to use a different lens today. You're going to try this today, or you're forced by the situation that you're brought into to be creative, to try new things. And I think that's what it's all about. It's about, getting out of your comfort zone, trying new things. One thing I like about, Jason's book is that it's not about just these kind of tips and things to do, but it's
food for thought.
It's a lot of
many,
food
many
for thought.
ways.
It's
And
a
not all
really
of it's
lot
dead
of-
on, but every once in a while you say, oh, you know what? I get that.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of people who have really thought a lot about their photography, and it's very interesting in that sense. But so, do you guys do these exercises Have you done these exercises? Have you found that they've benefited you?
I'll say right now, I don't use them enough. I probably should do it more, especially because digital is free. You can go out and take a bunch of photos that are pushing your creative limits and pushing the camera. It's going to be beneficial down the road. If you ever say like you shouldn't push yourself artistically, then maybe you're not supposed to be in the art. I firmly believe there's photographers out there that wouldn't ever pick up this book, and they would say like, I'm there, I'm good.
Yeah, but see, my point is that it's not necessarily about somebody rejecting the idea of the need or the possibility of improving. Right. It's more about the fact that, these exercises take time, and if there's not a goal to some degree in mind in a project, then why are we doing it? I get the idea if you're a student and you're working, you're practicing, you're trying to, and these things can be fun. I get that. But to me, with the limited amount of time, having a goal and going toward that goal is pretty important, succeed or fail. And some of these things just seem like they're kind of diversions.
In my experience, I learn a lot from the act of playing. I mean, some of my heroes like Bruno Munari spent their whole life talking about that. And I mean, even on jobs, sometimes I'll bring baseball gloves or a record player or something. I think play is always a part of it. I think it's important to build time in your life for that because, a lot of things happen by accident, things that are great. I mean, there's a few pieces in the book that actually talk about the benefits of mistakes in your process as an integral part of the creative process. And I think play encourages that to happen.
I could show you a lot of pictures I've taken that are wonderful, and they were mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that's also good to do on a regular basis is re-edit what you put out there and what you show people, and especially in the day of digital, because it's, again, this morning I shot, I don't know, maybe 100 pictures. Are 100 of them good? No, maybe 4 or 5 of them are the ones I'd really want to show. There are a lot of people will throw all of this stuff out there. Not every picture is good, and even if you're a working professional, I think this is really important. At least 2 or 3 times a year, if not more, go over what you're showing people when you're going to present work. And a good exercise is if you have 50 pictures, edit it down to 25. And if you ask anybody who looks at pictures regularly, if you can't make your point in 10 images, you've already lost. And having 10 strong images and another 10 okay ones drags everything down. So I think editing is an important tip too. Mm-hmm. Learn to look at your work objectively, not subjectively, and say, is that a good picture? And if it's not, get rid of it.
There's several assignments in the book on the topic of overshooting on both sides of it. One is from Eleanor Carucci when she was studying in Israel, and her professor told her to take 1,000 pictures a day.
Just buy a security camera and hang it over the wall.
That's right. Or Leanne Shapton's exercise. She was a swimmer. She grew up in Canada and actually tried out for the Olympics in Canada in swimming. But she thinks of a lot of sports analogies in relation to her artwork. And her assignment is called 250 laps. And it's to photograph one object 250 times a day for 2 hours over the course of a week. But then on the other side, you have Tina Barney, who tried to shooting digital and was frustrated by how fast. I mean, these cameras and this technology is made for speed. You can't really fight it. You have to. It's just the way that our bodies use this equipment.
It's spontaneity all the way.
Mm-hmm. So she actually had to go back to film to slow down because she preferred shooting in a slower way, where you consider every aspect of every single thing in the frame.
That's a very good point.
There's a game that I play sometimes with my friend Mike Slack. Actually, he put it in the book as his assignment. It's called the 7-minute game. And we came up with this when I visited him out in Los Angeles, where let's say we have 3 hours to kill. We'll drive around together and set the timer for 7 minutes. And when it goes off, you have to pull the car over wherever you are, get out and make a picture there. And we did this last week, actually, for about 6 hours together. As we were saying before, some of these prescriptive assignments often don't yield interesting results. a lot of times those days are more fun just as a personal experience rather than making great photos.
But it does jolt you. It does make you open your eyes and look around. There's a value to that. For me, in my opinion.
I think it's important to know, like, when you do these exercises, if you don't come back with 24 amazing photos, you shouldn't be discouraged.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
If you don't come back with anything good, you shouldn't be discouraged. It should drive you to try harder the next time or see things differently. But it's the act of getting out and thinking creatively and seeing creatively and then trying to capture that. That's
exercising
what you want.
your eyes.
Eventually, you're going to get a gem.
Jason, is there any other assignments you tried that you recommend? Or
one of my favorite assignments is by Philip Purkis, and he was talking about studying in San Francisco in the 70s. And he had a professor. His class was from like 4 to 7 p.m. And the professor would not allow them to turn the lights on in the room. And so over those 3 hours, once a week, the light would change dramatically in the room, get really dark, and the conversation would change at the same time. It relates to an essay I read recently called In Praise of Shadows. It's an old Japanese essay from the 30s talking about the time when candlelight was the main source of light and how that would affect what you would see. For example, lacquerware. This is a little bit of a digression, but y'all can edit it out. Lacquerware, for example, was never meant to be seen in bright light. It was meant to be seen by one candle in the darkness. So the black of the object disappears, and all you see are the gold details. So after reading that book, we had dinner in the dark the next day with one candle. And you just
I want our next episode to be on lacquerware in the dark.
I'd love to.
Can we do that?
I'd love to do an episode by candlelight.
There's a piece in the book by Tim Walker, a fashion photographer from England, and he says, only photograph what you love. And that's a great way to edit before you even take any pictures.
Yep. Get some passion into it. No two ways about it. No two ways. Well, that was a great, great, great talk. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, John, our producer and guest today, and Rob Reeves, our guest engineer. More of Jason's work can be found at jasonfulford.com and jandlbooks.org. Don't miss the Photographer's Playbook, an Aperture publication. More of Todd's work can be found at trvphoto.com. Give us your opinions on Twitter at BHPhotoVideo with the hashtag BHPhotoPodcast. And please leave a review for us on iTunes. It's much appreciated. My name is Alan Weitz. Thank you for joining us today.